Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the House Human Services Committee meeting. This morning, we are continuing our discussion on universal pre-K, trying to actually make it more universal. That would be one of our key goals, is to improve access to pre-K, and particularly in those parts of the state that don't have as good access as other parts of the state. So with us this morning is Beth St. James, and Katie will be joining us in a little bit. And thank you for being here, Beth.
Morning, you're welcome. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So before we begin looking at the language that Katie and I prepared for you today, I do just want to note that are you all aware of what what passed out of Senate education related to pre-K?
I'm aware of something about New Hampshire and cross-border stuff. I don't have the language of the bill, but that is helpful to work into the conversation. Yeah.
Yes, and we, if at any point you want to look at that language, I believe it's going to finance. So it's got a couple stops before it hits the floor, but Senate Education passed out language that was a compromise between the Agency of Human Services, AOE, and the school district in question. I believe it was NEK Choice, related to accessing pre-K through Act 166 funding in Section 829 in New Hampshire public schools. Very specific to that school district.
So actually, why don't, if you wouldn't mind, before we start going through this, if you want to pull that up, that would be great, because that's, based on our testimony, that is one of the key areas of the state where access is very limited.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can get the committee report for you. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I'm had to have my sound on last night.
So this is S214, which passed out of Senate Education last Wednesday. And I believe is stopping in finance this week and then most likely appropriations before it hits the floor. But this is all it is. So it's an amendment to Section 16 VSA 829, which, as we know, is the pre-K statute. And it doesn't amend anything in current law. It just adds a subsection to the very end of the entire section, which states, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the NEK Choice School District may provide pre-K education to eligible pre-K students by paying tuition pursuant to this section to one or more pre-kindergarten programs operated by a public school in New Hampshire that is located in a school district within 25 miles of the Vermont border. The Essex North Supervisory Union shall be responsible for administering enrollment procedures and managing pre-K tuition payments pursuant to this section and State Board of Education rules. The superintendent may apply for and receive a waiver from the Agency of Education and Agency of Human Services of any rule provision that is impractical for either the school district or the New Hampshire program by demonstrating that a substantially equivalent provision is offered. This is language that was provided to the committee by AOE and DCF.
So, I mean, the one thing that sort of stands out to me is that it just says public only. It doesn't
Correct.
say public and private.
Correct.
Do we know if there is private pre-K licensed by the state of New Hampshire?
Oh, I don't know. I was not in the room for all testimony on this, but I don't know that I can speak to whether there is how New Hampshire licenses pre-K. I was in the room for discussion about this being a intentional choice on the part of the agencies.
I'm gathering that was an intentional choice. I just am wondering. That sort of sets up a complicating factor from my perspective. If students in the rest of Vermont have choice for private or public, and students in this school district only have access to public, then even though it may increase access in that district. Not sure what to do with that. But it's helpful information to have, and hopefully when we have AOE here and we can ask DCF about the intent behind that, and if there may be a perfectly easily understandable explanation. Like maybe New Hampshire doesn't license private pre-K. I don't know. I'm sure that there is an explanation. We're trying to increase equity. And so on one hand it does, on the other hand, it sets up something that's different than other 3 and 4 year olds in Vermont. However, if there's no practical access to public or private in Vermont, in that school district, then, maybe it does help to achieve the goal. So we'll ask AOE when they're here, and Lori, maybe if we can have Janet available later today, that would be good too.
I will say Janet was the main witness on this from the administration.
Okay. So she didn't mention this at all yesterday, and we didn't bring it up. So thank you for bringing it up. Are there any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Just, so choice, a high school that has, or a school district that has choice, what if that goes away?
Oh boy, how long do we have?
Oh, okay. Probably,
So NEK Choice is the actual name of the school district.
oh, okay.
They have chosen to name themselves that because they do not operate any schools.
Okay. That's hence the capital C.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Thanks.
But they are part of the Essex North Supervisory Union.
Correct.
So whatever we put in place for the future needs to, I would say, take into consideration this concept
Right.
that they've agreed to
That's fine.
allow tuition payments. That sets up a whole other. So they're going to say, well, if you do it for pre-K, why aren't we doing it for K through 12? And maybe we are. And so we have joint school districts.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're not going there
Nope,
because
I
that's not
just-
our responsibility.
It was just a question like.
No, I'm saying that for
something
myself.
Changes.
Yeah. Something is
That
likely to
is a school
change.
district name, so that is,
So if they are
Clarifies.
incorporated into some other school district,
Mm-hmm.
that would need to change that. And I would suspect that before any education bill gets out, that won't stand alone as a separate bill,
Mhm.
would be my guess. Okay, yeah.
One question, this strikes me as being more specific than I would think Vermont statute normally is. Were there others who were looking for the committee to include their district in a similar arrangement along other parts of Vermont's border?
I will say that this language as introduced was much more general, as you normally would see. And this was language brought forward by the administration working with the school districts affected. And from the testimony that I was in committee to hear, there were several folks on all sides of the aisle, both the school district at choice, the administration, and the committee members, who were constantly asking, are there other school districts we're not taking into account? And I think the answer that I was hearing was always, I don't know, but no one has come forward. And maybe someone has come forward and I am not privy to that, but the testimony that I was in the room for was,
Not that we know of,
not
essentially.
that we know of, yes.
That surprises me, and I'm not extending an invitation, just, see.
Well, I mean, if you go back and think to the data that BBF shared, this isn't surprising, given that there's only 11% of the kids in that part of the state who have access to pre-K. So, and, you know, I'm trying to remember the rest of the map, you know, there is, you know, not so much in the upper western quadrant, but I suspect that there are, well, in the central part of the state, we have school districts that cross borders. So, so theoretically, there's already been something worked out around that. I don't know, but we're not going to add to that. But that's something for us to be aware of. And I think Beth will just let that continue to go along its merry way and not think about incorporating it into this bill. Because I think that's what my gut is telling me to do. So could you, now let's go to the draft language that you and Katie worked on and walk us through that. So, and I just forewarned committee members that this is just a very draft and it does not reflect our conversation from yesterday yet. Okay, I just want to be clear about that. Thank you, Beth.
I appreciate that very much. I did not have the opportunity to hear any of your conversation yesterday. And I also view this very much as a draft that I look forward to getting feedback on and incorporating it so that it does reflect whatever goals you have. So this is a committee bill. It's draft 2.1 because Katie and I were working on it together. There is no 1.1 for you to be worried about.
Okay.
So we are really, we're going to get into some education finance. It comes a little bit later, but the bulk of the amendments in this bill appear in section 1, which is to section 829 in Title 16, which is the pre-kindergarten education statute. First change you can see here is that the definition for pre-kindergarten child has been amended to mean a child as of the date established by the district of residence for kindergarten eligibility is 4 years of age or 5, but not yet eligible to enroll in pre-K. So 2 things going on here. 1, we've removed 3-year-olds. And 2, based on some of the conversations that we did here in this committee about, for lack of a better way to define it, redshirting, right? When you have a kindergarten or a 5-year-old who is eligible to enroll,
Yes.
but they have not been enrolled in pre-K, I think there's been a lot of debate about whether that child would qualify for pre-kindergarten education. That is a policy choice for you all. I should say funding for pre-K.
Yeah.
This language would limit it to 5-year-olds who are not eligible to enroll in pre-K. So they turn 5 after the cutoff date for their school district, which varies across the state. Again, policy choice for you all.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just to, you know, talk about what we did yesterday in terms of, it seemed like I heard consensus around the room that if one of our goals was to expand pre-K, I also heard don't do that at the expense of taking 3-year-olds out. And I just am wanting to make sure that if I'm reading the room correctly, so then Beth, I think we would be leaving 3-year-olds in.
Not me, though. That's them.
No, I'm just saying consensus around.
Oh, okay, yeah, I want kids to be kids and they can hardly stay awake. They find them on the school bus. They get back to the garage and they're sleeping in a seat and it's bad.
Keeping
Okay.
3-year-olds.
Yes.
Okay. What about that eligible to
Yeah,
enroll?
a second, go ahead. No, I meant
Oh.
just a second, Beth. Go ahead, Ann.
Right, yeah, and I apologize if I missed that conversation on the eligible to enroll versus enrolled, because you know, there are kids who are just not ready for kindergarten, even if they're technically eligible, and it seems like we're kind of closing out that decision to wait. And I'm not sure. My first reaction is I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Not that I wouldn't, you know, more discussion and all that, but that's my reaction.
Uh-huh. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Go ahead.
Yeah,
I actually, you know what I think I'm gonna do is, because it looks long, but it's really just because there are elements in lots of different places. Why don't we let, Beth
Go
and
through it
Katie go
first,
through it and then we'll come back. Morning, Katie.
Morning, how are you?
Great.
So I'll, put it back in your hands,
I
Beth.
circled that with my pink pen.
Okay?
Okay, so no changes to the definition of pre-kindergarten education, no changes to the definition of pre-qualified private provider. So we're out of definition subsection. We're on page 2 now, line 4, subsection B, access to publicly funded pre-kindergarten education. So again, big policy choice for you here on line 5. Current law is that students are eligible students are eligible for not fewer than 10 hours of publicly funded pre-K. This draft contemplates not fewer than 20 hours of publicly funded pre-K.
We are gonna hear from JFO, to give us some estimates about this, so, okay.
No changes regarding the choice between enrolling in a pre-qualified private provider, a public pre-K program outside of your district, or the pre-K program operated by your district. That all remains the same. No changes here. We're on page 3 now. We're still in subsection B, line 12. Here's some language that requires school districts to be responsible for providing or arranging for the provision of pre-K education to ensure all resident students have access to a pre-qualified provider. I have added this language at the direction of adding this language, and I think it needs a lot of work. What does being responsible for the provision of or arranging for mean? If this is a concept that you want to explore, I think I would recommend that we get more specific in this language. Does that make sense?
It's not how, we use this phrase a lot in our business.
Okay.
So, but you're the education expert, so, if it needs further clarification, what the intent is that they either provide it in, in a school building, or they contract with private pre-qualified providers. I mean, that's, or I guess in the case of, across the border, I'm not sure how to deal with that, but, private pre-qualified providers, or I guess they could contract with, other public school districts.
That's a clarifying question.
That's why we didn't get specific, because we don't know what the governance and what the districts are gonna look like.
I know.
Yeah,
What if the district contracts with some private providers, but a household identifies a private provider in their community that is not one of those contracted entities? Could the family still receive their pre-K through the provider they themselves found, or would they have to go through the contract with the school district? Did that make sense?
I understand. So if the school district says, okay,
here's a list.
here's a list of the ones that we have contracts with, and the family says, yeah, but this one is a qualified, they've been qualified by the state, why can't I get them? I would want them to be able to, if they've been qualified by the state.
Okay. I think the language in subdivision 3 that's current law, I think this has been I think this is already happening. So subdivision 3 says, if requested by the parent or guardian of a pre-K child, the school district of residence shall pay tuition to a pre-qualified program operated by a private provider, or a public school in another district, even if the district of residence operates a pre-K education program. To me, that is exactly what you just described.
Right. Yep. But the part that we don't have in law is that it's a school district that's responsible for making sure that there is a program, whether it's public or private. So right now, all we really say in law is that we'll pay for it if you find something.
I see. It's
So
a finding.
It's putting the locus of responsibility at the school district level to assure that there is access, not just saying, if you find it, we'll pay for it.
Okay.
That's what that's supposed to mean.
Okay.
So subdivision 4 actually does talk a little bit about, and there's no change, just as existing law, just talking about how the school district should collaborate with AOE and AHS and BBF.
But actually, the nothing in this section shall require district to begin.
Right, so that's the
That's-
piece.
That's the contrary piece.
That would have.
Right, so it's almost like
Struck.
taking that sentence out,
Out. Yeah,
because then it's
yeah,
directing the school district to work with, collaborate with all the partners to ensure. And some of the discussion we heard yesterday about how Addison's doing it really well, I think they're doing it through a regional pre-K coordinator, which could be a model that could be expanded.
Seems like
I was gonna ask, what information do we have? I don't know if that was under a formal regional plan as envisioned by this part of the statute, but do we have examples of regional plans actually being created towards this end?
well, I think I'm gonna encourage us not to get too far in the
Yeah,
weeds
yeah.
on this, okay? So what we stick at the 50,000 foot level. Because what we want to make sure is that somebody is responsible, and it's education funding, so it should be the school district that's responsible. And those school districts are going to look different at the end of this session or next session or some session. I don't know when, but school districts are going to look different than they do right now. So I don't think we should sort of like on what exists right now, but what we can allow to exist in the future.
I guess the reason I ask is, do we need to do something to give it more teeth? 'Cause something does exist now, but if it's not actually achieving the goal, then we
No,
need to.
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's what I was trying to do in number 5. But maybe we do need to strike out the nothing shall be construed to require a school district, because we actually are requiring a school district I think, I don't know what other people think, but I think the collaboration between AOE, Building Bright Futures Council, Human Services, and meeting with the school district, how do we expand capacity here? So can we direct more pre-K development funds, in this region, that kind of stuff. So, I agree that, Representative Bishop, that we actually want to require them to do that, not just to say it's an option.
Yeah, it looks like 4 and 5 could be, work
The
together.
concepts, yeah.
The concepts work
Yeah.
together, just making it, but it shall be construed.
That it shall-
You have to do
it shall
this
be
thing.
construed that you have to do this.
Well, I think I read that shall be construed to mean that the school district is not required to begin or expand a public program to operate pre-K. That's how I read that language. And I'm not hearing you want to require a school district to operate a pre-K program. What I'm hearing is you want to require a school district. I think Chair, when you put it the best, the thing that resonated the most with me was that the onus is not on the parents, it's on the school district.
Yes.
And with that direction, I think we can come up with some language for you for next draft.
So, because the intro does say, if it's insufficient,
Right.
then you shall be construed. And I think that is part of what we want to say. If you can't access it through other mechanisms, then you would have to start your own.
Oh, I think you're talking about two different things.
We want to assure access. If they can't assure access through private, then yes, they do need to consider public.
Okay.
The overall goal here is that students in whatever part of the state you live in have access.
Equity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Because it says private and public providers in the lead in to number 4.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Eastis.
So my question is around the notion of children being able to cross district lines, that's something we're saying is okay here. Do we need to touch on that because of what might be coming later in Act 73, or do we just leave it alone?
I think that that's above our pay grade here. I think that I was noting the same thing, and the notion in Act 73 is that you have available within your school district. The only time you get to go outside your school district is if there isn't availability in your school district. So
Yeah,
if that were to apply, then, you know, you would say the same thing. You could access it outside of your school district if your school district didn't have ample supply. Yeah.
I would just add to the conversation though, that I personally view it differently for children of this age. I'm thinking of the circumstance of Burlington. A lot of people work in Burlington who don't live in Burlington. They may live in Underhill, and their preference is to identify a provider in Burlington so that their 3-year-old is closer to them rather than
Yeah.
a 35, 40-minute, whatever.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So that's where I would differentiate it.
I was thinking of it more from the, I mean, it seems like, of course, you want to think of it from the family's point of view, I get that totally, but also then from just the clarifying notions from the school district's point of view about how they're gonna have to need to move money around and how does that all work? There's something
They currently-
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the concept of, because of the age of the kids that we're talking about, I agree with you, Representative Bishop, that there needs to be more flexibility perhaps than at high school level. Yeah. So we're not saying it has to be limited to the school district.
And nothing, we're keeping that piece of current law that basically allows you to go wherever you want, as long as it's a pre-qualified provider. Yeah. Even if your school district operates the program. And add the education and finance changes to our town tuition program that took place in Act 73 that are contingently effective on a whole host of things that haven't happened yet, are separate from the pre-K statute.
Oh, okay.
It's only for K through 12.
I see, okay.
Okay, so we are gonna move on. We're still on page 3. We're in subsection C now, pre-qualification. We're not changing any of the major requirements here. Still have to have either accreditation through NAEYC, at least 4 stars or 3 stars, and a plan to achieve 4 or more stars. And here we do have a change to pre-qualification. So under current law is what is now subdivision B in this draft. It just requires a licensed provider to employ or contract for the services of at least 1 teacher who is licensed and endorsed in early childhood education or in early childhood special ed under chapter 51 of this title, period. This draft contemplates 2 separate requirements. In what is now subdivision 2A, it requires current law for private providers. So shall employ or contract for the services of at least 1 teacher who is licensed and endorsed in early childhood ed or early childhood special education under chapter 51 of this title. But now for a pre-qualified public provider, they still have to employ or contract for the services of at least 1 licensed teacher, but that teacher has to be present and actively teaching during the hours pre-K education is provided.
The same for private.
Okay.
So this is one of those tiered effective dates. So do you want this
That would not be effective right away, no.
So we have that in this draft. So right now you have the language you're looking at in 2A and B,
Yeah.
where they're treated differently. In
Something else is coming.
2029, yeah.
Okay.
You know how I love to,
I know.
in the same section. So section 2 of this draft has the private and public being treated the same, and that takes effect July 1, 2029.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to make sure I have clear understanding. This talks about at least 1 teacher. So if you have 3 pre-K classrooms with UPK students in each of those 3 classrooms, the requirement would be to have a minimum of 1 licensed teacher. So the other 2 classrooms could operate without a licensed teacher as long as.
And it actually doesn't, they don't even have to be in the classroom. This language doesn't require them to be in, and that's the way they're operating now. So it's underlined because I'm not sure, why is it underlined here?
Well,
Because we bumped the existing language.
Because there's an A and a B,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. That, all we're doing right now is saying you can continue to do things as they are right now because we realize there's a ramp up period in order to get teachers licensed. So what is being required in B, as Katie just said, when we get to that section coming up, will also be required for the private providers.
Aren't lines 18 and 19 new?
Yes.
Yes.
Who is present and actively?
Because that's what's happening right now.
That's in a public.
In the public
In the
school
public.
system, they have, their collective bargaining agreements require them to have, teachers qualified, to teach in all classrooms in the school. So all this is doing is representing what is currently happening. It's not a new requirement. It's not a new requirement. It's
It
not,
still says at
it's not
least
current
one
law.
teacher, though. It doesn't say in each classroom.
It doesn't say in each, well, it says during the hours pre-K is, the intent is in each classroom has it. Yeah.
We need to say that.
It's like it
because
has
otherwise-
the effect of that. If they're present and actively teaching during the hours of pre-K, if there are multiple
They
teachers.
can't be actively teaching if they're not in the
The
classroom.
person is actively teaching in one classroom. It doesn't say there has to be one
I
in
agree,
each classroom.
I agree with Ann.
Yeah.
I don't think it says that.
It doesn't require, yeah.
First of all, Chair, what is correct around the collective bargaining agreements? There's also a statute in chapter 16 that requires all teachers and teaching in a public school to be licensed under chapter 51. I will just say I'm happy to add the term in each classroom. I have heard conversation in the education committees over what is a classroom. This is certainly an area that we can have further refinement until you are happy on, but I just wanted to flag that as a non-education practitioner, it was surprising to me that the term classroom could be construed as ambiguous, and that is what I have heard.
Well, I guess it says at least one teacher. I think that's maybe what's hanging Representative Donahue and I up. So when it says at least one teacher, you could have 3 classrooms and that one teacher could be present and actively teaching kindergarten. Do you understand what we're saying?
Yes, I was just gonna say, I think that in the interest of time, I think I understand your intent and we can come up with new language for next draft.
Yeah, it could be just one teacher per classroom if it weren't for the classroom definition
Right.
problem.
Or it maybe says something about students are taught by.
I was just gonna say, I think we have to rework that whole section and just say pre-kindergarten education provided pursuant to this section shall be provided by a licensed teacher. Yes.
Yes.
And lines 12 through 14 are underlined, but that actually reflects current law.
Yeah, that's the question I just asked.
Yeah, because B, is the existing law. I bumped it down and created a new A, which had to be underlined. Which now I realize is confusing and I should have kept A and underlined B.
You and me have the same wavelength.
That was my understanding of current law, but thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're all the way up to page 5.
All right. Okay, so.
Yes, there is the hours thing.
Yep, so subsection D, we're on page 5, line 4. The change here is instead of 10 hours of publicly funded pre-K, we're looking at 20 hours. Again, that's a policy choice for you all. But the time period and the same constraints about when the tuition can be used is the same as current law.
Go ahead.
Does anybody know what the average number of hours for a quote full-time elementary student is?
Oh, that is
Do you
the
want me to-
question.
Do you want me to answer that?
Generally, on average. I mean, it's 20 equivalent to half-time or three-quarter time or full-time or.
I have an answer for you. I'm concerned about it setting off some. I'm looking to the chair.
We don't know is the answer to that question.
Okay,
And AOE is, they don't know either.
okay.
Well, I shouldn't say they don't know. They have given testimony that says it can vary by school district right now. So while we don't have a uniform school calendar, we don't have a uniform school day either.
So that's little caveat to putting any number of hours into pre-K if we don't know how that lines up with what rest of the school.
Well, we know it's more than 20. That's all we know.
Right, it could be slightly more, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Or lots.
Yeah, did you have, oh, no, sorry. Okay,
So we're still in the tuition section, no changes, no changes. Until we get to page 6, we're still in the tuition subsection. Line 4, subdivision 3. This is what allows school districts to count pre-K children in their average daily membership, which, if we remember, is one of the numbers that is used to calculate how much money a school district gets and how our tax rates are set. We are repealing that section. One of the major changes in this draft is that pre-K education would no longer be a part of a school district budget, which means the school districts don't have to count the number of pre-K students in their average daily membership, which is a technical term for calculation of long-term weighted membership, which is how we arrive at our tax rates, and then under the foundation formula, how you arrive at,
So repeal it because of Act 73?
nope, we're repealing it because now we are replacing that provision of adding paying pre-K through school district budgets with a categorical grant, which means off the top of the education fund. So it's still coming out of the ed fund. That means it's still funded from the same sources, but instead of being a part of a school district budget, there's going to be a whole separate calculation for pre-K students, and it's just going to come in a lump sum grant to the school district. And there's a whole provision for that in here. That is how you pay for school meals. That's how you pay for special education. That's how you pay for transportation reimbursement, flexible pathways, CTE. Well,
We're not
some
creating-
parts of CTE.
we're not creating something new, in other words. It's just, we're identifying it rather than, making up, it was causing a lot of consternation in the Ways and Means Committee, and thinking about this. And it doesn't do anything negative to access any of those other services. It just simplifies it, particularly because we have private providers involved. And so it will hopefully, one of our goals was to equalize the payments between private and public. And so that was an idea that came from some members in Ways and Means, and the chair of education and I thought it sounded like a wonderful idea. Anything we can do to simplify things, although it will cause complications for school districts because it will reduce the number of students in the average rated daily membership. Yeah,
If they're running a pre-K now, they're gonna lose.
if they're running a pre-K now, correct.
And if it's costing them less to run it than they're getting per pupil added, then it's gonna hurt their budget.
Well, right, and that's a concept that we have to talk about. One of the things that I didn't talk about with Katie and Beth is, do we enable school districts to provide more than what is
Paid for.
paid for?
In that.
That was-
Well, what is allowed for here?
Yeah.
And that comes back to the equity issue again.
Because if that's part of the categorical grant, then it's not helping with the equity.
It's, well, and it's another whole issue, but we'll come back to that.
No, I think that was my question.
Oh.
It was like, could communities elect to pay more?
It's a question.
Yeah.
Could they pay more? This will deal with what they receive.
Right.
And that's also another bigger question rolled up into the foundation formula.
Mhm.
Will they be allowed to locally spend more and raise that locally? I have a lot of personal opinions about that.
Yeah.
But not necessarily relevant. My personal opinion isn't relevant to this discussion. So I think we do have to come back to whether we're limiting it to the hours that are being paid for, or we allow school districts flexibility in that. And there's pros and cons to both. But that's another, we will have to address that question. So think about that when we come back to that 20 hours and when we have JFO in here. Okay. Okay.
Okay, rule. Still requiring, I think this is an open policy question for you all over whether there needs to be or whether you want to see any change in the regulation of pre-K. This is a shared program right now. And this draft keeps it a shared program. So the Secretary of Ed and Commissioner for Children and Families shall jointly develop and agree to rules. We keep that the same in here. We just take out references to rules that might no longer be applicable.
Tell me what page you're on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am on page 7.
Okay.
Bottom of page 6.
Yeah, the pages for some reason don't quite align. Some of the.
With the printout?
That's what I have.
Aligning.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. One of the earlier ones, it's like, oh no, that's line 6, not 4, but
Oh, so what did, I'm sorry, so you didn't make any change?
well, I think we did.
I don't see anything underlined.
Nope, we didn't. Okay, so we didn't make any changes there. We're on page 10 now. We're flying. No changes to subsection F. No changes to subsection G. No changes to subsection H, which is the geographic zone concept.
So I'm just going to mention to committee members, so as we're going through and saying no changes, that doesn't mean that we don't necessarily want to make changes. I think that, it's kind of our first time seeing this, so we're going to have to sit with it a little bit and make sure that no changes is really what we're intending, okay? Because we already found one place where that wasn't really the case. Yeah, okay.
So, I think, yes, that brings us to, page 12.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
a question about these regions. Does that have an impact on the earlier discussion about, and the current practice of parents having the option of sending their child to whichever
Yes,
outside of districts?
yes.
So what's the interplay between those?
Just what my only understanding of this is from reading the black letter of the law. So it gives the school board the power to limit the geographic boundaries within which the district will pay tuition. I don't think it changes the determination, like the parent's choice within those boundaries. But it would prohibit the choice beyond those boundaries. So.
So the example earlier I gave of a Underhill parent who works in Burlington and opts to have the school district in which Underhill sits can opt to draw a line that would put Burlington outside of it, and therefore the parent would not be able to choose a Burlington-based.
Yes,
pre-K provider.
however, subdivision 3 in this subsection so there are some considerations that need to be made in this subsection. If they're going to draw those lines, subdivision 3 does say that if they do draw those lines and a resident pre-K child is unable to access publicly funded pre-K within the region, then the parent or guardian may request in its discretion the district may pay tuition outside of the region. And then except for the narrow exemption permitting all other provisions apply. So yes, I think that this scenario that you just said under this language, it's the universe of possibilities that does exist.
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is actually happening and whether you keep this concept as a policy choice.
And whether we say may should be shall. They don't have access. I think that, one of the things that, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because this is, it's all moving targets still. Which, we heard from in testimony. both from BBF and from DCF yesterday saying, try to change as little as possible, given that there's still a lot of things moving. And I think that, bless you, I think that is a recognition that depending upon what happens in the bigger universe of education, we may need to come back and revisit this again. I understand what they're saying, but I also think that there are changes that we can make that can improve access and equity at the current time. I think this is a question. I mean, it makes a difference on where the school district boundaries are drawn. They're pretty small right now. But the pre-K region, this is a different notion. So the pre-K region can encompass several school districts right now. And so do we keep that concept of pre-K region, or we just go with school district? Do you know what I'm saying? Because the school districts are going to be bigger. I don't see any version of anything where school districts stay the same or are smaller. I only see them getting bigger. So I think that's something for us to think about. And it's one of those things, do we leave it the way it is for now? Or, do we change it to just school district? Or we leave it the way it is and come back to it? That's a decision for us to make. And remember, this bill is going to go through a lot of other committees before it reaches its final. And I am sure that they will change whatever it is that we come up with. So don't get too wedded to whatever it is we put in there.
I think I'd also, in this particular conversation we're talking about places where there's plenty of access and people are choosing to have access in different ways. But the overriding value here is that we're trying to make sure that the places in the state where there is no access, that's where we really want to focus. So it's sort of like, I think we could leave this alone for now.
But we're also wanting, I think, at this age to ensure that parents have maximum flexibility. And so, you were given to Chittenden County. There's a steady stream of traffic between central Vermont and Burlington going in both directions at, the Vermont version of rush hour in the morning and in the evening. So I can see, and these Chittenden County and central Vermont are not going to be in the same school district, whatever map is drawn. And so, that's sort of a real life kind of example where I can see, parents working in Burlington, living in Waterbury and deciding, there's an opening at the Y and I can access it there and I work 2 blocks from there and I can, so I think we need to allow for that maximum flexibility. But I think sort of, whether we think about needing to do anything with this sort of like pre-K region now, I think it will become obsolete in a new version of education. But ability to access beyond your school district will not become obsolete. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So whether we wait for the rest of the stuff to then come back and remove pre-K regions, or we remove them now and just talk about school districts, whatever those boundaries are, and parents having the flexibility to move within the districts. Yeah. So just something to think about between now and tomorrow.
Good.
Okay.
You want to do section 2?
Sure.
Okay.
Page are we on?
We're on page 12, line 4, new section.
So this is your tiered effective date. So this brings us back again to amending the language about how many licensed teachers are present. If you remember the language we looked at earlier, we divided it into a private provider section that was going to maintain the status quo for a certain number of years. And then there was the public provider section that had the addition of having the teacher present and actively teaching during the hours when pre-K education is provided. So as of July 1, 2029, this amendment would treat both types of providers the same, meaning that private providers would no longer be on a legacy path, for lack of a better word.
And then section 3, we go to page 13, line 4.
So just before we move to section 3, that's so, and then anything that we change previously in B would also change here.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to share again, my concern about whether we fully understand the current field and whether we have, how big of a jump this is for private providers.
And whether that's sufficient time.
That's,
Yeah. I'm gonna contend that if we're gonna pay them more, you don't get this, you have to have higher qualifications. It's like, you're gonna get your paid, you have to.
and again, I'm being
No, I know, you're trying to be sensitive to that.
sensitive to that. I wonder if we, whatever opportunity we get to hear from private providers, that this is perhaps a greater obstacle than we're anticipating. Is there a tiered payment approach? If you're following the current guidelines or requirements for presence of a licensed teacher, but not in every classroom, you get X. If you have a licensed provider in every classroom, X plus. Still an incentive to move towards that quality of a licensed teacher in every classroom, but may recognize some realities that I'm speculating about at this point. But I think I'm just overall concerned about doing anything that would move against our broader goal of maintaining increasing access. I don't want to limit or lose any current qualified providers in the UPK system because of this.
So I'm just gonna be transparent that this is also trying to alleviate concerns that there are from some in the building about the use of public education dollars in private enterprise at all. So have to,
So having that
Yeah.
same requirement would
Might be.
right,
It's
it's a way to address
it
that.
it
yeah.
removes some of the argument, let's just put it that way.
Right.
It removes some of the argument saying that there are lesser qualified people in private pre-K, which is then one of the arguments. So we got to weigh all those things. I understand what you're talking about, and we're going to get an opportunity to talk a lot about that in the early childhood education licensure bill. And I share those same concerns, to be honest, and how that. We have to remember that in the private world, we're not only thinking about the whys, the why, but we're also thinking about home-based pre-K.
Yeah.
Which there are some. Yeah. Thank you for continuing to bring that up. I mean, I think we need to think about how that works. Okay.
Section 3, we're gonna go to page 13, line 4. This is, it may be a policy question that you have already decided and I am just not aware of it, or I missed it. But I have a question for drafting purposes of when you want these changes to take effect because of the changes that you have made in Act 73. So the way I have drafted this draft is that the changes that we just walked through, with the exception of section 2. So section 1 would take effect July 1, 2026. And section 3 would also take effect July 1, 2026. And that is a change to the definition of average daily membership in your school finance chapter in Title 16. So this is the section that spells out how you calculate average daily membership. In subdivision C on line 9, page 13, is for how you calculate average daily membership for pre-K students. But we're pulling pre-K students out of the calculation of average daily membership. But this definition includes children receiving essential early education lumped in with pre-K students. And that is special education services for children between the years of 3 and 5. So pre-public school, essentially, preschool special education years. Right now, when you're calculating average daily membership, you lump pre-K students and children receiving EEE services together. what section 3 does is it pulls them apart. So we're removing reference to pre-K students and we're keeping children who are receiving essential early education in. If you want all of these changes to take effect when the foundation formula kicks in, July 1, 2028, assuming the contingencies are met, then we would not need section 3. We would jump right to section 4. You can see the big change here. It's the exact same changes to subdivision C. But you can see on page 14, line 2, average daily membership, there's only one sentence there or one lead-in sentence. But if you scroll back up to page 13, line 5, you can see that the term average daily membership is defined differently. And that's because section 3 is current law and section 4 is contemplating the changes that were made in Act 73 for the foundation formula. So if you want the changes you made to section 1 to take effect on July 1, 2026, you would need both of these sections. If you only want the pre-K program changes to take effect with the foundation formula or a future state, then you would only need section 4.
So I would say that in talking with the chair of Ways and Means, that would be her preference, would be make them at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Mhm.
So a moment ago, you just said special education is done through categorical grant. So if special education is done through categorical grant, why do we need to deal with this in the average daily membership?
Special education for K through 12.
Oh, not pre.
Triple E is still accounted for in school district budgets by counting triple E students the same way you count pre-K students. And then K through 12 special education is provided through a census block grant.
Okay. And do we know why that is?
I don't.
I don't either. But maybe we can ask AOE that, or maybe I can ask Emily Kornheiser, Representative Kornheiser that. I'm just trying to, part of one of my other goals is to have pre-K stand out where it needs to stand out, but not where it doesn't need to stand out. And because I think that as a body, we want to send the message that pre-K is part of education. And we, just that, I just don't need to say anything more. And I think that the more that we do things that aren't necessarily related to the considerations we need to make because of the very young age of these students, I'm wondering out loud now. Sorry, you're hearing my brain process work, which isn't very organized sometimes, about why when we did that revision to how special ed was funded, why pre-K wasn't included at that time. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we need
And
more
why would we-
information.
Why would we want to split it now rather than both being, I mean, if.
I would want to both
pre-K
pull that. That's what I'm
Right,
saying.
right, yeah,
That's what I'm contemplating.
that seems to make more sense.
I know triple E is different than regular special education. I know that. But it is special education for young kids. And I'm just wondering if it has to be that way or if we're just choosing for it to be that way. And that requires a conversation with people who aren't in the room right now. So I think if we can just put some big question marks about that, I don't think we should assume that we're going to keep it the way it is. We might be making a recommendation to make it different. In other words, to be the same as K to 12. If that's possible. If it's not possible, then, because I know there are different rules for triple E services.
I would have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I am not your education finance attorney, but I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
So I do think this is a conversation that warrants talking to Ways and Means.
Yes, yeah, that's,
Bringing John and JFO in on.
Yeah.
Mhm. The complicating factor is one of the compounding factors is the foundation formula contemplates funding special education right now through a weight and not a census grant.
Okay,
You are getting a recommendation back from JFO, the contractor that JFO has hired, the 45A report of section of Act 73. And so there may be recommendations in there to keep special education funded through weights, to change those weights, or to go back to some sort of grant, categorical aid grant. I have no idea what that recommendation, but the way Act 73 was when it was passed was special ed is now a weight.
so I'm wondering if we could have language that just says whatever is agreed upon, that pre-K is included.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, you have a beautiful opportunity where you have this study ongoing right now.
Right,
So definitely, if you're having JFO in,
yeah,
perhaps something to flag for them
yeah,
on the scope of work for their contractor.
yeah, okay. I don't want to limit ourselves to just saying, well, pre-K has to be different, if it maybe doesn't have to be different. If it does, then, you know, we live with that, but, okay, thank you.
And can I ask a question related to your answering my question of when all of this, which is a super clear term, would take effect, and when you talked about it taking effect at the same time as the foundation formula, that would be all of the changes contemplated in this bill, correct? Or just the funding piece?
The teacher.
The teacher piece aside,
Yeah,
the 20 hours, all of the other changes we talked about to section 829.
yeah. I think that I don't know the answer to that question right at this moment.
Okay.
I feel like I need to consult with education and Ways and Means. I know on the payment side, Ways and Means chair has been very clear with me, you know, do it at the same time.
Mhm.
On the other stuff, the chair of education has, I need to consult with the chair of education. To know whether that makes it easier. And I don't know what other dates they're going to come up with for whatever other things they're going to add to this bill, you know?
Yes.
So I think that whatever we put in here is likely to change. And we're going to need to just track that closely to make sure that people are thinking about the pre-K part as well. So I don't really have an answer for you at this point in time.
Understood. Okay, so we've gone over the average daily membership piece. On page 14, section 5, this is the definition statute for your education finance chapter, the master definitions for chapter 133. Right now, pre-kindergarten child, which is a term that we're seeing in the ADM calculation, is defined as including pre-K children and triple E children. I amended this definition to just be children receiving essential early education now, because you don't need a definition for pre-K children in this master definition list, because section 6, page 15, line 6, creates a brand new grant program. I feel like that was clear as mud.
Yeah, and I'm trying to read it at the same time you're doing it. So child receiving essential early ed means a child who is 3 or 4 years of age and who is 3 or 4 years of age and who is receiving essential early ed. That seems very circular to me.
Yes, I think that's just a mistake I made.
Okay, all right. So
I don't even.
you're saying we don't need to define pre-K child?
Correct.
Gotcha. That's essentially what you're saying here.
Yeah.
Okay, you're just saying 3 and 4 year olds receiving triple E that's who they are.
Yep.
Okay. I think I got that.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry.
No, that's
for the
fine.
confusion. Section 6 is your pre-kindergarten education grant. I think this section needs some work. This is a starting point for you all. So we start with definitions for the section. And we got to get real cute here because we can't rely on the concept of average daily membership. We're coming up with our own concept for how to count pre-kindergarten children. So enrollment means the number of pre-kindergarten children who are enrolled in a pre-qualified public pre-kindergarten provider and a pre-qualified private provider, as that term is defined in section 829, and on whose behalf the school district pays tuition pursuant to subsection 829D of this title on October 1st. So October 1st is generally, it's like the first 10 days in October where everyone's doing their kid counts for education funding. So,
And that's not contemplated to change anyplace else.
not yet.
Yeah, okay.
Here we've added a new definition of pre-kindergarten child for this section. A
Right.
child who is 4 years of age, and we're going to change that to 3. 3 or who is 5 years of age, but who is not yet eligible to enroll. I flagged that as a policy choice for you all. Who is enrolled in a pre-kindergarten program offered by or through a school district pursuant to rules adopted under 829 of this title. And then 2, you're going to be doing this count on a 2-year average enrollment. That's how we calculate almost all of our education funding is 2-year average enrollment or 2-year average daily membership.
To try to smooth out any big,
Right.
okay.
A question about that, if we are trying to expand access, might that number be a little more fluid than your average K through 12 grades? And so is a 2-year average still appropriate?
That's a question for JFM. And I will put whatever number they tell you is best in there. That is really a fiscal perspective more than a legal perspective. So 2-year average enrollment means the average enrollment of pre-kindergarten children of the 2 most recently completed school years. We're trying to leave no ambiguity on how you're counting these kiddos and what school years you're taking into account. Then we get to subsection B on page 16. The grant. Annually, the secretary shall pay a pre-kindergarten education grant to each school district in an amount determined by multiplying the district's 2-year average enrollment of pre-K children by the statewide rate. Flagging that as a big policy choice for you all. I don't have any direction that you're not keeping the current statewide rate and having the statewide rate calculated as it currently would be. That is a policy choice for you all, which may be adjusted regionally, that is established annually through a process jointly developed and implemented by AHS and AOE. That's the current language for the determination of the statewide rate.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. What is the process in Act 73? And Katie, I just have a text from Ways and Means asking if you're able to go over there.
Okay, right now.
Oh, and it's for our bill, apparently.
Yeah, we have to go to judiciary.
Oh, you have to go to there.
I told them quarter of.
Okay, you told, they've been, okay. I told her that we're almost done, so, okay. Okay, so question. How does Act 73 treat foundation formula? Doesn't it say established by the General Assembly?
Oh, yes, the foundation formula is set as a base that is arrived at through calculations that I am not
Right.
enough to understand. Yes, but there are still under Act 73 a number of categorical aid grants.
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to understand is what it's saying here is that AOE and AHS would determine the grant amount, right?
No,
No.
the
okay, it's
grant
not.
amount is based on the statewide rate is the amount of money the kiddo gets, so the family gets, right?
Yeah.
For this draft, I have kept the statewide rate the same. So the statewide rate is determined by AHS and AOE. but then you take that rate and you multiply it by the 2-year average enrollment of pre-K students, and that's what the district gets.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's,
Okay.
what I was meaning was the rate.
Yeah.
The rate is
Yes, yes.
by AOE.
That's a
and
policy
AHS.
choice for you all.
Okay, all right. So just like that.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
if I could, I would just flag again for your consideration. I think you were reviewing something when I was making this point earlier, but the 2-year average, if we're trying to create more pre-K, let's take a district in Northeast Kingdom that moves from 50 to 100 spots, and we take a 2-year average, do we really want to be paying them? They've created growth quickly. It's exactly what we want. Paying them at an average 75. You know, in an.
Is that fair, right?
Is that fair? And I think it's just not as, we hope perhaps it's not going to be as static as K through 12 because we want to fuel growth in pre-K. So I'm just a bit concerned about a 2-year average and whether that's going to end up underfunding.
I'm wondering if there could be language that says, unless there's a certain, I don't know how to measure it, disparity, deviation between the 2 years that's greater than blah, 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 blah. You know, so that allows for what you're talking about, because in the couple areas of the state where we have, you know, kind of pre-K deserts, we would hope that we could increase it on a faster pace than maybe in other places. So let's flag that for JFO. Okay. Or I don't know, is that, would that be a question to ask them?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I think yes, I think that would be a question for JFO. And if you, if you want to send me an invite for when you have JFO, so I'm in the room, if I am not otherwise occupied, I'd be happy to be here.
Okay.
Part of that.
Thank you. Lori just heard that.
Good luck with my calendar. Okay, so.
Okay, all right, I got it.
So there's a grant. I have not built in any language that is prescriptive on how school districts disseminate that money, because I think it's covered in section 829, that the rate is paid to the program. The statewide rate is the tuition.
Say that again.
I have not put any language in here, right? It just says this grant is just to the school districts.
Right.
There's nothing in this section of law or section of the bill that then says, and then with that money, school districts, you have to you do X, Y, and Z with the money.
And we didn't do that because.
I didn't do that because I haven't received any policy direction that would be different than what happens in current law, which is already contemplated in 829. And that is that the tuition payment is the statewide rate. So I think it's already contemplated in 829, but if
Does that make it equal? That's you know, that's the only thing I'm really concerned about. I want to make sure that for the provision of services, that it's an equal amount, that there shouldn't be any judgment that's applied by the school district in what it is that they contract for if they have to pay a private provider.
No, I think that I think that's maybe I shouldn't have said anything. I think it's already contemplated here. But if you deviate from the statewide rate, if you make a policy choice that the statewide rate is not going to be the number you multiply your 2-year average enrollment by, then we may need to make changes elsewhere as well. As long as you stick with the statewide rate, I think section 829 is clear that tuition payments, whether it's to a public or a private provider, is the statewide rate.
Can you point me to where it says that?
In 829.
You're saying 829, that's like saying the move.
I'm sorry, that's section 1. It's the pre-K statute.
Okay, section 1. All right.
Let's see, tuition is subsection D. So on page 5.
Okay.
Line 4, tuition. I'm on line 10, tuition paid under this section shall be at a statewide rate, which may be adjusted regionally, that is established annually. It's the same language that appears in the grant section that I just walked through.
Yeah.
And all I'm trying to flag is, because this draft keeps the statewide rate, I don't think you need to make any changes in section 1. They weren't ready for it, so.
I understand sort of like what you're saying from a legal perspective. I'm not sure that I don't feel as confident that the policy would be clear enough. I feel like we need to make a statement someplace that that public provider and a private provider for the provision of pre-K are paid the same amount.
I will add language to that effect for the next draft.
Okay,
Chair, is it the current, the $3,900 is paid
Yes.
to a provider?
right, so they set the tuition rate, but they set the tuition rate for private providers.
Right, because isn't it, not sure I understood this correctly, but from the JFO report, the review of early childcare, it talks about a $6,900 figure that's envisioned, that's gonna be triggered by Act 73.
I haven't read that report, so I can't comment on that. Act
Okay.
73 didn't make any changes to pre-kindergarten education. So I don't know off the top of my head what that means.
So right now, under current law, pre-K providers in the private sector are paid, I guess I would need to ask this question of JFO, but I think they must be paid what is contemplated here in statute as the statewide rate.
Correct. That's my understanding.
Right, and the earning capacity, as my colleagues in Ways and Means will tell me, is double that essentially for school districts on average.
Because of how you currently fund pre-K through school district budgets.
Right. So I'm feeling even more that I would like that
Explicit.
statement to be explicit about
Understood.
that would be in statute.
Understood.
I don't want there to be any interpretation. Okay.
So we're gonna go back to page 16. There is subsection C, I'm just gonna tell you that there's an inflator in here.
Yeah.
Move on.
Is this the same inflator that?
That we use everywhere else.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's the same inflator that's contemplated for the foundation formula?
Yes,
Okay,
I believe so.
okay. That's all good. So we just, if something changes about that, then we should make sure to change this language as it moves.
Sure. And when do you have JFO coming in?
We're scheduling them. I know.
Oh, okay.
Working on it.
Okay. So then we have, effective dates. I can already tell you we need to make changes to this based on, or maybe make changes to this based on this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's more likely that they'll be all effective. I'm not positive about that, but or whenever the foundation goes into effect. Don't worry.
Disrupt.
If there, I know, I'm just like.
Yeah.
All right, that was a lot. And a lot of questions, for us to contemplate. We're gonna take a break right now, and we will come back. Lori, when do we have Representative Burrows? Is that, okay?
She's scheduled at 11:15. I am still.
Okay, okay. Why don't we come back at 11:15? Let's take a little bit longer break, and that will also give you a chance before we kind of launch into committee discussion, a chance to maybe read through the bill, to look at things that where we said no change, to make sure that that's that, and to think about some of the concepts that we've talked about. So why don't we say 11:15? And at 11:15, we might have Representative Burrows on the ADA coordinator bill, and we might not, but we'll have her at some